We are joined by Nick Hossack, former advisor to Prime Minister John Howard. Nick, welcome to Spectator TV.
Thanks for having me, Alexander. Nice to be here.
You've been very busy writing lately, and I want to chat to you about a couple of your articles today.
Right.
The first relates to health insurers who are reviving those strange 9-day fortnights and 4-day weeks, variations on working hours which never seem to result in a pay cut. Now, you've argued that one way or another, the taxpayer is going to suffer. Nick, what are you concerned about with these experimentations in the working week?
Look, I think it's very interesting that what we're seeing is a bit of a push in one particular industry, and that is medical health insurance. It's two businesses there now, one Bupa and the other one Medibank, what they call trialling much shorter working weeks. In the case of Medibank, it's a 4-day week, but paid for 5. And in the case of Bupa, it's 9 days of work, paid for 10. Now, these are effectively pay increases. Now, it's fine for a business to arrange its workforce in any which way it likes. However, I think when you're receiving massive taxpayer subsidies, such as the health insurers receive in the form of the health rebate, they're effectively subsidies to the shareholders and the workers. You've got to be very careful, and you certainly should not be leading sort of industrial trends like this, which are essentially, at the end of the day, just putting up costs for taxpayers.
We did talk about an interesting part of this, not just the subsidies, but a thing you call cost padding, which happens as a result of experiments like this. Now, I found this part very interesting because it's not limited to health insurers. We see it in other industries like not-for-profits and government bureaucracies. Nick, what is cost padding and why is it so bad for our productivity?
Yeah, cost padding is a very insidious incentive, if you like, throughout the economy, and particularly the not-for-profit sector, because the not-for-profit sector doesn't pay taxation, of course, and the revenues that they receive should pretty much match the costs of the production. So what that does, it incentivises organisations, particularly if they can get revenue and their revenue can increase as their costs increase. What it does is it incentivises the staff in that organisation to maximise the costs of operating, and in particular, to maximise their own sort of welfare and well-being. And we see this in particular, you see in the credit union sector, you see it in other sectors which have very high kind of degree of non-profit operating. We see this, the costs just build and build and build, and the costs of which are just passed on to either the taxpayer or onto consumers. And that's what I think we're seeing in relation to health at the moment. Now, Bupa, and there is one caveat here, now Bupa and Medibank are not actually not-for-profits, but they have similar incentives because the increases in their premiums each year has to be approved by the federal government. But the federal government will only approve those increases if they can be justified on costs. So you can see an incentive there that, wow, if we can push these costs up, well, we're going to be able to recover it with the government's authorisation through the premiums. And also, it's a pretty concentrated industry, so there's a little bit of market power there. And I think that's what we're starting to see with these shorter work weeks. We're starting to see these businesses start to push the cost up.
Well, I guess if you've got a private business, they're always trying to reduce costs because they have to make money. So if they're going to build a road, they're going to build a road in as productive a way as possible. But if you're going to build a road from a government and the government's allowed $10 billion for the road is going to cost $10 billion. They're not going to make a cost-cutting exercise for it because they'll use all the available funding, which means, as you say, they'll pad out the costs until they get there. But before we move on to another article, we've seen a few private companies play around with these strange work weeks before. Now, admittedly, almost all of them have given up because it costs too much. But some companies care, and some companies are really large and they're more interested in their ESG scores than actually being profitable. But you use the image of a child promising to walk a dog to convince their parents to buy a puppy to explain why these things might appear to work at first. Nick, why are some of these schemes successful in their trial runs and then fail catastrophically shortly afterwards?
Well, if you look at Bupa, I said in the article that the prize here, if the trial quote is successful, is 25 long weekends for the employees of Bupa and paid long weekends. So that is an incredible incentive for the staff who are being supervised through the trial to make sure they get this over the line, right? To make sure that they tick every box. There's going to be less sick days. They're going to be happier. Of course, they'll report better mental health. And the trial will be, no doubt, a resounding success, and they'll go to 4 days and they'll become locked in. That will then spread to other organisations in the same industry, and pretty soon it will become a standard thing. Now, once it becomes a standard thing and everyone's kind of over the novelty of it, as I said in the article, I think that, what reasserts itself is just, human condition. And that is that people will feel more entitled, they'll feel just as grumpy, they'll go back to the old levels of depression. It'll kind of just start over, and then they'll be wanting 3 days a week or higher pay or something like that. It's just inevitable. And we've seen in victim groups, history of victim groups, the more you subsidise and pamper them, the more entitled they become, the angrier they get, the more depressed they get. And I think that that's an analogy here for what's going to happen.
I think you might be right.